So UFOs and ETs aren't my exact specialty, but astronomy is. And my second slide just shows that here's me in like 20 seconds. I grew up in Detroit. Well, the suburbs, no one's really from Detroit. And I
So back.
moved here to Colorado when I was 18 and went to basic training at the Air Force Academy. So I graduated from the Air Force Academy with a physics degree. And I spent 20 years in the Air Force as a physicist. But a seminal moment happened at the academy because I majored in physics. I had grown up with Christian parents, going to church all the time, youth group and everything, and I accepted Jesus as my savior at age 10. But then majoring in physics, I was presented with the evidence for the Big Bang model. And I hadn't really known it, but kind of growing up in the church and the youth group I went to was kind of an inherently the universe is 6,000 years old kind of scenario. And I was presented with evidence that was very convincingly contrary to that. Thankfully, I was in the Navigators, and my mentor, who had discipled me, had been aware of this book called The Creator and the Cosmos by Hugh Ross, who's the leader of a ministry called Reasons to Believe. And that book kind of changed my life. Like it solidified my understanding that science and scripture could be coherent, and kind of the rest is history. So I've become a professional scientist and also not professionally dabbled in apologetics, and really appreciate the privilege of coming and talking with this group. Thanks to Donald. Since then, here's some key things. So up in the left-hand corner is me at Minnesota in a lab as an Air Force officer. Messing with electronics. The balloon picture is our telescope that was being tested in New Mexico. At the end of my PhD time, as I was writing my dissertation, I was studying the cosmic microwave background polarization signal as part of studying the Big Bang model, ironically. Up here is me messing around in the classroom at the academy. I spent 7 of my 20 years on active duty as an instructor in the physics department, teaching physics and astronomy at USAFA down the road. Then my wife and I were both active duty, retired each other in 2018. Now I work part-time at the planetarium at the Air Force Academy. That's a picture down there. So I do lectures for mostly kids on field trips. I also teach astronomy at a local high school a couple days a week. And I have 2 kids. My son Conley is a freshman and a big-time hockey player in soccer and track. So I spend half my life at soccer fields and hockey rinks. And the other half of my life, when I'm not teaching stuff, is my daughter Liz there, also known as Lightning Liz. She's a world champion American Ninja Warrior athlete. So we travel around the country. She goes and dominates obstacle courses, and we bring home lots of medals and stuff. So it's pretty fun, but overwhelming at times as well. There's me. Game plan. Do you know 2/3 of Americans believe that intelligent alien life exists? It's from a 2021 poll. So 65% was the exact number. Why? We're going to start off with some historical context. Some stuff. If you're into this, I don't know, I can see some faces. By body language, I can tell some are really into this. So this is probably not going to be new, but I'm hoping for some others, it's going to be educational. Why are we here? Why are we talking about this? So then, we're going to explore opinion number 1, which is that majority, that 2/3. We are not alone. Intelligent life is common throughout the cosmos. Then in 2 flavors. The scientific basis, reasoning, or evidence for that platform. And then the philosophical motivation or inspiration. And then, what about opinion number 2, which is the minority? We are alone. Earth is the exclusive home for intelligent life in the universe. What's the scientific basis, reasoning, and evidence for that position? As well as the philosophical, and in this case, theological motivation and inspiration. Finally, how do we make sense of all this from a Christian perspective? So there's the flight plan. Couldn't help it. Been in the Air Force practically my whole life. Okay, so here's the hype. A brief history on the hype that we experience now today. It goes back to 300 BCE. I don't know if that's news to anybody. So this Greek philosopher named Epicurus is at least credited with the first suggestion written down, I guess. I can't imagine this didn't occur to people before him, but he gets credit for it. And you can see this quote of him saying, there's an infinite number of worlds, some like this and others unlike it. So effectively he's saying, there's other planets. Some of them are probably inhabited by intelligent beings. All right, way to go, Epicurus. Fast forward a ton, almost here to the 20th century. So this guy, Percival Lowell, there's a really famous observatory named after him, the Lowell Observatory. And believe it or not, about 100 years ago, a little over, this is a quote from him. There's a drawing that he made of the canals on Mars. That Mars is inhabited by beings of some sort or other we may consider as certain. as it is uncertain what these beings may be. So he was totally convinced there's Martians. Only 120 years ago. Moving on, a little more fun. This is the event that really kicked off the modern phenomenon, I would say. So Roswell, New Mexico, 1947, something happens in the sky, something lands on a ranch. There's actual pictures of it this time. I mean, it looks kind of like aluminum foil to me. True believers used it to kick off, the phenomenon. The Air Force ends up explaining it as a weather balloon. Other explanations further down in history say there was actually a project called Operation Paperclip, where the United States had snuck Nazi scientists into the United States and were building craft that they had worked on while they were in Germany in World War II that did not have wings. And those could have been these crashed vehicles. Anyway, that's a whole lecture in itself. After that, Project Blue Book kicks off. So the Air Force takes it seriously enough that, not really 47, maybe 48 or 49, they officially investigate UFOs for almost 20 years. Come up with reports, many reports. It ends with what's called the Condon Report, where this guy named Edward Condon files the final thing saying, hey y'all, there's stuff, but it's not a threat to the United States, so let's drop it. And that was the end of that Project Blue Book. Along the way, a biggie was in 1952. They called it the UFO flap. So in Washington, D.C., on 2 consecutive weekends, apparently, tons of UFOs being seen all around town, around the Capitol, which, that's a little freaky. Our nation's capital, you have tons of people. So this is just a graph of time, number of reports per day. Here's late July, boom, boom, crazy spike. You can see, explained away, but it freaked people out, even the president and others. In 1961, the famous Drake equation. If you've never heard of the Drake equation, it's a biggie, yeah, by Frank Drake. It was presented at the first ever meeting of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And it attempts to, as you can see the N on the left side of the equal sign, categorize the number of civilizations in the Milky Way today that could communicate with us. That's a little abbreviated term. And you can see some of these terms in number of stars in the galaxy, fraction of stars with habitable planets, fraction of habitable planets with life. It goes on and on. Large uncertainties in all of those numbers, of course. But with just back of the envelope, he was quoted as saying probably about 10,000. Probably about 10,000 advanced communicating civilizations in our Milky Way galaxy back there in 1961. That's a little more fun. Hollywood got into the act. And it's a big influence, I think. Star Trek, the original Star Trek, it only ran 3 years, 66 to 69. Ironically ends the year that America lands people on the moon. Star Wars, 77 to 83 was the original trilogy.
Yep, the best ones.
I figured this would stir up emotion, especially. Same year as Star Wars Episode 4 comes out, 77, is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's a little more obscure. Have you heard of it?
Heard of it, never seen it.
Okay, well, maybe tonight will inspire you to watch it. Close Encounters of the Blank Kind was invented by a guy named Hynek, who was the scientific consultant to Project Blue Book. So he coined these phrases, Close Encounters of the First, Second, Third, and eventually Fourth and Fifth Kinds. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is not a movie. This is one, if you go on YouTube and just type in alien and UFO encounters, this comes up. So the people who love this stuff, they bring up this Rendlesham Forest. So Rendlesham Forest is outside of Suffolk in the UK. America had a base there. Air Force officers in the United States went out to a forest and touched an alien spacecraft hovering there in the woods. And there's red lights and a beam of light that shined on them and everything. Made drawings of it. Made drawings of symbols that were on the side. This is actually a replica in that forest right now today. So if you're really loving it, you can go on a little hike. Go check it out. And E.T. in 1982, still long before everyone in this room except for 3 of us was born. The most number of copies of any scientific work ever published in the history of the world is the book Contact by Carl Sagan, released in 1985. A movie made later with Jodie Foster as the lead. Anyone seen that? Another for the list. Contact, the movie or the book. back to a little bit of reality. SETI. So SETI's officially started in 1984, ironically right there by ET. Still operating today, so it's been going for a long time. They get radio telescope time. That's in the Very Large Array down in New Mexico. Listening for intelligent signals. Jump way ahead. 27. So now you're alive. 2017. Did anybody follow this or no? Wait, in 2017, is anyone aware this happened? No. Okay. Some heads nodding, cool. Others not. Good. This will be new to you. So in 2017, videos from F-18s were released to the public.
Questions.
Not intentionally. I think it was a guy who kind of just got a hold of them and wasn't approved to do that. If you've seen them, this will be old news. But if not, let's see. Will this work? Do you think, or not? Oh no, it was working before. What do you think? No.
Those are.
You guys are tech guru.
Is that your laptop that's displaying right now?
Yeah.
You can do Windows P and then duplicate.
Windows P. Duplicate.
Yeah.
Okay.
This guy's good.
I'm putting that double E.
Yes.
The aforementioned tech guru.
Yes. Let's see if this works. No. Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Dozens of pilots for several months, and that the object spotted could remain airborne for up to 12 hours at a time. A few months later, in 2015, when the USS Theodore Roosevelt had made its way over by the coast of Florida,
Here we go.
during a separate incident, pilots captured another clip that shocked everyone involved. The interesting thing about this clip is that the craft captured seemed to rotate and fly in a fashion somewhat similar to that described.
Oh, those are another guy. So there it is. There were a couple of videos like that. And so then there was a New York Times piece describing a program that's been run at the Pentagon for years investigating UFOs. And
Totally not
eventually-
based out of an installation in Nevada.
Yeah, of course, Area 51 comes up. And then Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as well. So I forgot to mention that. Part of the story of Roswell was that the debris from the Roswell crash, as well as alien bodies, even some people said one live one that survived until 1952. But the debris sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for study. And as part of my Air Force career, I just happened to have one of my jobs, and I've got the t-shirt to prove it. I was the director of operations for the Foreign Material Exploitation Squadron at Wright-Pat. And so if there's any squadron with a name that would imply exploiting foreign material, if you know what I mean, it would be that. I can assure you, there was nothing interplanetary in our inventory. But I worked there. Just last year, here's the culmination point right now. On Capitol Hill, in July of 2023, 3 people stood in front of a panel of congressional members and described their experience. 2 of them were pilots, and one of them, an intelligence officer. The intelligence officer, so the 2 Navy pilots described what they saw in some of these videos and other instances. The intelligence officer's name is David Grush, and I actually know him personally because he, as in his reservist role as a major in the Air Force, worked at the planetarium at the Air Force Academy until 2022. So we overlapped a couple years, and I gave presentations with him. And the last day I saw him, he said, "I'm not going to be working here anymore. You're going to see me on TV soon, and I'm moving elsewhere for my own safety." I was like, "Whoa, okay." And then he said this in front of members of Congress. U.S. federal government maintains a highly secretive UFO retrieval program and possesses multiple spacecraft of non-human origin, as well as corpses of deceased pilots. That's Dave. Awesome. That was less than 2 years ago, sitting in the planetarium down I-25. He said, yeah, that was a shocker. And
So based on the fact that you know him personally, how credible is he?
see, I didn't have much overlap with him,
Okay.
but seemed like a rational, sane guy. Ranked pretty high in the Air Force and in his civilian job. He was like a full bird colonel equivalent as a civilian in the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, his job there, which is what allowed him to get the intelligence that he felt was criminal and become a whistleblower. So, yeah, which is the conundrum as we go forth in this exercise. Anybody know who those two are?
X-Files.
Yeah, the X-Files. It's a favorite in the 90s. So here's some facts. I'm gonna summarize the hype part of the briefing. So 95 to 99% of all UAP, oh, I just switched the acronym. Guess you gotta erase that, start over. Yeah. Unidentified or unexplained aerial phenomenon is now the lingo. So now you know. So they're later explained by just, they can be explained. Natural phenomena are the biggie. Weather, stars, the moon, secret military aircraft, meteors, satellites. And then there's just flat out hoaxes, people trying to get attention, fame. And then there's hallucinations, mass hysteria, something like that. About 1 to 5% of the reports, which because there are like 1 million reports every year on the planet of UFO sightings, the residual is over 100,000 and growing. So they remain unexplained and they have this term residual or RUFOs. Get a little vocabulary lesson. And then, of course, there's thousands of close encounters, like the 100,000 plus, that's just I saw something in the sky. Then there's the close encounters, like abductions. Talking close encounters of the 3rd or 4th or 5th kinds. And some of those result in injury or death to the contactee and or their close animals, like pets and cattle and stuff like that. So these are reliable, reliable reports that this really does happen. And in other cases, there are encounters that the alien has revealed very important moral, spiritual, and scientific information to the people. Right, so here we go. The we are not alone position. The scientific arguments for alien life. So here's the biggies. Come from books and YouTube. You know, Neil deGrasse Tyson's a big one on this. There's other names. He's kind of the most famous. Here's a picture of the James Webb Space Telescope Deep Field. Came out the first month it was operational. Just stared at a spot of sky for a few hours, and every single dot you see that doesn't have a pattern is a galaxy. The ones that are the pattern are foreground stars in our Milky Way. All the rest galaxies, some up 12, 13 billion light years away. So, with images like that and just the knowledge over the last century that this universe is billions of light years across, the universe is so huge and so vast, there must be at least one other place hospitable to life out there. We can't be alone. It's so big. There's so many other chances. Okay, so how big? Here's some current estimates. Probably 1 trillion or 2 galaxies in the observable universe. We've got great data. This is one answer, like in the Drake equation, we know pretty well. So we've got surveys that have been going on for decades. We're just huge telescopes staring at the sky, counting up stars and galaxies. Probably 1 trillion stars, because on average, your average galaxy, when you measure it all out, about 1 trillion stars in each galaxy. So 1 trillion stars. Let's say there's 10, we have what, 8 planets we call planets, but Pluto, Ceres, you could call, maybe aliens would call those planets. I don't know. It's not a hard and fast term. It's a sphere. 1 to 10 trillion planets. Let's call it 10 trillion planets. I should have said trillion there. There's a typo. We caught it though when we were talking. 10 to the 25th power planets. Let's go with that, okay? That's pretty huge. It's a lot of chances, right? Okay. We presume that, you know, we have this term habitable zone. I don't know if you're into exoplanets, but only 5,500 exoplanets have been discovered to date. Out of the 10 to the 25th, we presume are in the observable universe. That's because it's hard. They're really hard to detect. They're tiny little rocks next to huge balls of gas.
They don't glow.
But the green around here is indicating, hey, we think liquid water is required for life it is here on Earth. So if a planet or a moon is gonna host life, it's gotta have liquid water, and that means you have this little zone that's the right distance from the host star for the surface temperature to be 0 to 100 degrees Celsius. Liquid water, right? Too close, it's all water vapor. Too far away, it's all ice, probably not life. Great posters like this are made all the time. Potentially habitable exoplanets out of those 5,500. So favorite, this is in ranked by distance from Earth. Proxima Centauri b, it's orbiting the star that's the closest to Earth, 4.2 light years away. Can you imagine that? Discovered in 2018. And there's a ton of other ones. Some of the more famous ones are Tea Garden stars, the new TRAPPIST-1b, E, and F. So there's a system called TRAPPIST-1 that has 3 planets in the habitable zone.
Is this all within our galaxy?
All in our galaxy. Great segue. There's the extent of our search so far as astronomers. Here's the Milky Way. See the red kind of fuzzy? That's where all the planets have been discovered. We barely tapped it. I mean, are there exoplanets out here? Well, of course there are. There's stars out there. Score.
It looks like we can only look in. Why?
Only look in towards the center.
Yeah.
So those dots are just a handful of discoveries that happen through micro lensing. So you have to have this big background source like with big huge stars near the center of the galaxy, and their light gets bent in micro lens like Einstein, general relativity, gravitational lensing of the light. And it's a freaky technique. Only about 100 total exoplanets have been discovered that way. And there's that preponderance of them just because of the background when we look from Earth towards the center of the galaxy. Most have been discovered by the Kepler Space Telescope, which stared at 100,000 stars for 9 years, detecting their brightness variations. And so if a planet crossed in front of the star's face, that dip in light indicated the presence of a planet. So over 3,000 of the 5,500 we know of came that way.
Wouldn't all these ones going off towards the center of the galaxy, wouldn't those be too close to the black hole?
To be habitable?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Those are definitely, yeah, anybody would agree. Not a chance, not a chance, not a chance. Way too close. The radiation sterilization time. Techniques are improving. Exoplanets are discovered every day. The number changes, but we're still just in the few thousand. That said, you kind of run the numbers statistically on this 5,500 that have been discovered, and astronomers estimate probably 300 to 500 million potentially habitable exoplanets in this galaxy alone. So how could none of them have life, and probably advanced life? That's the argument. Number 2. Going to a different field, which I know there have been talks in this room about in the past. Am I right? Abiogenesis. Life emerging through chemical evolution naturally with no input from anybody else. So, number 2 argument for the we are not alone position is life emerged very quickly after Earth became habitable. So abiogenesis must be easy. If it happened that fast here, it must happen all over the universe. Here's how fast it happened here. The simplest history of life on Earth you'll ever see in one diagram. So, the radiometric dating of Earth rocks, moon rocks, Mars rocks, asteroids, meteors, they almost all come back with this number of 4.5 to 4.6 billion years ago. So high confidence that this solar system formed about 4.5 or 4.6 billion years ago. The first evidence of microbial life through fossils is about 3.5 billion years ago. So at slowest, it's 1 billion years from when the planet forms to when there's life here. However, other studies indicate with high confidence there was a period called the late heavy bombardment in the solar system's early history, where Jupiter and Saturn, along with the other giants, were migrating around due to gravitational tugs and influences, and they scattered what used to be way more dense asteroid and comet fields than we have today. And those comets and asteroids went crazy, flooding into the inner solar system, pounding Mars, Earth, Venus, and Mercury to the whole top layer of a mile of Earth is just pure magma. Until about 3.8 billion years ago. So, hard to imagine life doing well in a mile of magma. But then We've got also, so Earth's surface cools below the mile deep in lava temps at about 3.9 or 3.8 giga years ago, so billion years ago. The oldest microbe fossils, like everybody agrees, for sure there's life by 3.5 billion years ago. But there's some geological evidence, like indirectly, it could have been here at 3.8 billion years ago. And the late heavy bombardment ended at like 3.8 billion years ago. So instantaneously, the moment this planet becomes habitable, really, there's life here. So that must be easy. I mean, you just primordial soup, right? You just throw the stuff together, boom, you got life. Happened fast here, had to happen elsewhere, we can't be alone. Number 3. Okay, even maybe abiogenesis isn't that easy, but why think carbon-based life requiring liquid water is the only game in town? There could be, probably is, other forms of life out there. Anyone heard that argument before? Yeah. I'd be so closed-minded. There's some good reason, basic good reason for it. Carbon with those 6 electrons in that outer shell, that's mixes with a lot of elements. That's why we call ourselves carbon-based life, because these tons of molecules that are required to make us work. But right below it, silicon, a lot of the same properties. There's one of probably many books about silicon-based life by a guy named Ray Kroc. The point is silicon and some other elements, but silicon's the fave. They've got similar properties to carbon. They can make big molecules. And various compounds are common throughout the universe. They're liquid at a variety of temperatures that aren't constrained to 0 to 100 Celsius. They could support other forms of life chemistry. There's methane lakes on Titan. There's liquid nitrogen on some other planets. Enceladus has liquid ocean, and Europa does too. So just don't be so closed-minded. There could be other forms of life out there, even if it's not carbon-based or needs water for life chemistry. So those are the big 3 of the scientific argument for we're alone, or we're not alone. So how about this? The philosophical argument, we can't be special. We know we're not special because the Copernican revolution happened. Thinking we're alone is arrogant. That's a word that you'll often hear from proponents of this standpoint. And it defies the Copernican 400 plus years of scientific advancement. Earth isn't the center of the solar system. The sun is. And then we found out even the sun isn't the center of it all. The sun is just a regular star going around this regular galaxy, which is a regular galaxy in this sea of trillion galaxies. So putting it all together, abiogenesis must be easy because life popped up so quickly here. And we'll figure out we don't know how that worked, right? But we'll figure it out soon. Macroevolution, of course, Darwinian macroevolution has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. The fossil record clearly indicates that, life advances through natural selection. Put those two together with 10 trillion planets and maybe a multiverse, no doubt, ET must exist. Okay. Good? We are not alone philosophy. Cool. I like this one summed up by the famous Stephen Hawking. Here's a quote from him. The idea that we are alone in the universe seems to me completely implausible and arrogant. Considering the number of planets and stars that we know exist, it's extremely unlikely that we are the only form of evolved life. That's the standpoint. I think I have a picture. So this is, I brought up Neil deGrasse Tyson before. He shares the sentiment, but I thought it's funny. I found this online. I saw him say this in an interview too. Just because you can't figure out how ancient civilizations built stuff doesn't mean they got help from aliens. So he's kind of realistic about, he's definitely on board with this. He's one of the main advocates in the 21st century of this sentiment, but he also has his, come on. Okay. They were smart. They had 100,000 slaves at their disposal. They built the pyramids. Okay. In summary, I'm just going to throw a little fun at it, but we're transitioning to the we are alone. Famous poster from the X-Files. Essentially, if it were somehow proven we are alone, the naturalistic atheistic worldview would be in serious trouble. It can't be. So that's why if you've committed yourself to that worldview, a priori, it has to be, there has to be other life out there, essentially. Alright, so moving on. That we are probably alone. So I'm a scientist, so I can't make a final conclusion or anything, but we are probably alone, the argument from a scientific basis. So yeah, there's 10 trillion planets probably at least. Man, this universe is incredibly inhospitable. Tyson actually is famous for saying, it's out to kill us. Having even one habitable planet in this observable universe is exceedingly improbable. From just a mathematical standpoint, if you just run the numbers of statistics and probabilities. Sometimes you call this local fine-tuning argument. I think in this very room or some other venue, I've done a whole talk on the local fine-tuning argument. So here it is in a nutshell. Got a couple of slides. Bottom line is, this Earth has just the right relationship to the star distance until the moon is essential to the existence of life here in many ways. Doesn't size rotation. Our atmosphere is incredibly fragile and unique, probably in the universe. Our terrestrial cluster, like plate tectonics, we take it for granted. First of all, that was just figured out in the 1960s. Eating up carbon dioxide, subduction into the crust, convection back. It's crazy fine-tuned. The rest, anywhere near a black hole like this, you're dead, like you were saying. Most galaxies, totally inhospitable just because of the size of their black hole. Andromeda Galaxy, our nearby neighbor, 2.5 million light years away, huge black hole. We have a tiny little 4 million solar mass black hole. It's crucial. That thing's like a billion. The one that we imaged a few years ago in M87 is 4 billion solar masses. So that led not just secular scientists to coin a phrase, the rare Earth hypothesis. The subtitle, if you can, why complex life is uncommon in the universe. For kind of those reasons. As we learn more, we're like, oh dang, all these things have to be right. And liquid water over the last couple decades has figured out this habitable zone, like when you hear that term, it's always about liquid water, but there's really tons of habitable zones. Give you an example, like the ultraviolet habitable zone. The amount of ultraviolet light that hits a planetary surface has to be just right within some boundaries, and if you're too close, then you have too much heat and liquid water and UV don't, like there's this tiny little confluence of these habitable zones. Of course, no other planet found so far has met even 3 of the over a dozen habitable zone parameters. Earth has them all, it has over a dozen. So that's one of those arguments, is the local fine-tuning argument. Then it's the abiogenesis is implausible given the extreme complexity of even the simplest organism. 14 billion years and 10 trillion planets, not nearly enough chances to justify faith in a naturalistic origin of life anywhere in the observable universe. But I like this, I came up with this one. I don't know if you're gonna like it, but I think it's pretty funny. So have you heard of the Miller-Urey experiment? It was devised in the 1950s by a couple guys, not coincidentally named Miller and Urey. And there's the contraption in a diagram. They put some chemicals together and they did some fake lightning, and a couple of versions of amino acid molecules emerged in the bubble down there in the water. And with that, you will still find this in biology textbooks. And it is used as like the example of, look, primordial soup. You just need some chemicals, you need some energy through lightning, and you build the basic building blocks of life. From there, no problem. No problem. 40 amino acids, all left-handed, all in a row. It's just a matter of time before we did figure out the mechanism by which that will happen. Then this is what we know now. There's just an example of DNA replication. Ridiculous complexity. The fact this just happens automatically billions of times a day inside your body and every other living thing is insane. So the discovery from the 1950s, not too much longer, we learned DNA. Yeah.
Weren't scientists unable to produce the Miller-Urey experiment?
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't too long that it was debunked. And then it was discovered the primordial soup they were simulating with geological evidence. They're like, this probably never existed ever anywhere on this planet either. So here's I came up with this, the power of evolution extrapolation fallacy using the long jump analogy. So my son does hockey, track, and soccer track. So he's a long jumper. A couple years ago in 7th grade, his best 13 feet 6 inches. Last year, 8th grade, 15 feet 7 inches. This year, he's already posted a 1710. Well, carry that trajectory forward. When he's a college senior, he's gonna be jumping 31 feet. And when he goes to the Olympics in 2032, he's gonna be jumping 39 feet, right? Logical.
Isn't Pitt only like 25 feet?
Yeah, well, no, it's a little longer, but the world record's 29. The world record's 29, but don't you see the trend?
He's got it in there.
Obvious. So, gotta probably get where I'm going. There's the limit. We're finding it, like the biological community, the origin of life community is finding that this is not likely, and that's why they're turning to this term panspermia. If that's new to anyone, it's a really weird word. It means, well, yeah, life probably couldn't have originated here, so it must have originated somewhere else and got delivered here, either by aliens or meteors or asteroids or something from other solar systems. Solved.
Nope.
That's what panspermia means though, and it's taken quite seriously in that community. Another quote from another famous scientist, that's really bad resolution, Fred Hoyle. He's a British, he's an astronomer. He's credited with coming up with the term Big Bang in the 1940s. Jokingly, condescendingly. He was not a fan. He did not believe it, and he didn't believe it mainly because he was a very staunch atheist and realized that if there was an actual beginning, holy cow, that lines up with Genesis 1. That's a problem. So he tried to ridicule the theory on BBC radio and came up with that term Big Bang. That's that guy, and look what he said. Life could not have had a random beginning. The trouble is that there are about 2,000 enzymes, and the chance of obtaining them all in a random trial is only 1 part in 10 to the 40,000th power. An outrageously small probability that could not be faced even if the whole universe consisted of organic soup. This is a guy who absolutely was not a theist, didn't believe in God. But he's just based on the evidence, that was his conclusion. All right, scientific argument number, I don't know. Oh, this is extrapolation on the local fine-tuning argument. This is from one of the books by Reasons to Believe that I'm a fan of, and I don't know, take it or leave it, but rolling it all up, the requirements to sustain bacteria for 3 months, it's like 501 parameters they came up with, and the chances being about 1 in 10 to the 308th power that you would find some planet or moon in this universe as we know it that could sustain bacteria for 3 months. The numbers just get more ridiculous as you go to higher complexity organisms like unicellular life for 3 billion years. There's another 175 parameters, and that likelihood goes to 1 chance in 10 to the 553rd. Then let's go to requirements to sustain intelligent physical life in a globally distributed high technology civilization, which would be what would be required to build spacecraft and travel across the galaxy and fly around in some other planet's atmosphere. 816 parameters, blah, blah, blah. There's some details on the math. 1 chance in 10 to the 1029 power is what this particular research team came up with. Who cares if you're off by a factor of 500 to the exponent, it's still 0, right, mathematically. 0, so that's that argument. Number 3, it addresses that third argument from the we are not alone, which is you don't need carbon, you don't need water. It could be something else. That has been studied. Life's dynamic duo, water and carbon, are probably truly unique and required. So the notion of this other forms of life is pure speculation and probably just pure sci-fi. Books are written about it. There is a book called The Unique Properties of H2O by several scientists. I think more interesting, more fun is just about 4 years ago in 2020, these pretty famous, like I knew who Sarah Seeger was before this paper even came out, on the potential of silicon as a building block of life. So these serious scientists, this is a pretty high reputed place, right? Anybody heard of MIT? So they really explored this from a scientific perspective, and this is from an article written about it, summarizing, because I didn't want to throw that big nasty paper on the screen. So what's their verdict about whether the Hortas or other silicon-based beings are possible? I'm sure that's some sci-fi character. Make a long story short, doesn't look very good. There aren't many organic silicon compounds to begin with, and silicon-based life in water or on an oxygen-rich planet would be all but impossible, as any free silicon would react quickly and furiously to form silicate rock, and that's pretty much the end of the story. So, number 4, favorite. Interstellar travel looks really easy in Star Wars and Star Trek. Happens all the time in these movies and TV shows and books.
Hyperspace ain't real, guys.
Wormholes, it's not happening. So,
All right, coach, come back when you've developed the hyperdrive.
So any alien larger than a microbe attempting to traverse interstellar space to Earth, even from the nearest star system, which is only 4 light years away, they're done. They're dead. Here's why. Take forever. Unless the aliens lived for thousands of years or actually did cryo freeze, you gotta go crazy fast. So like 1% the speed of light, which is 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. 1% of c. And space isn't empty. It's often portrayed that way in Star Trek and Star Wars, right? No, there's 1 trillion molecules per cubic meter in like interstellar space between galaxies. So if a spacecraft, if you're really gonna take a spacecraft that's anything bigger than like a molecule, the collisions at those, you can do, 1/2 mv squared. We're at mines. Oh, I should have done a calculation. That would have been really fun. I know you're trying to take a break from the grind, right? We could do it though. 1/2 mv squared times 1 trillion molecules per meter for 4.2 light years, destruction. No chance.
Ratio.
So if it's not destroyed by particle impacts, aliens will die from the cosmic rays of radiation poisoning from all the giant stars, pulsars, the Milky Way's supermassive black hole, etc. This is highlighted through this project called Breakthrough Starshot that a group of investors and scientists are probably never going to pull off, but it's an idea that's publicized enough to pull an image like this off the internet. I know Zuckerberg's involved with it. The idea is to send a fleet of drones to that nearest exoplanet, Proxima Centauri b, 4 light years away, going 10% the speed of light by way of just putting these little robot drones with this little light sail on it, and you shoot a laser beam at them from the surface of the Earth and get them going 10% the speed of light. So 3 times 10 to the 7th meters per second. If you do it, it's only 20 years. 20 years to go the 4 light years. Take pictures, send them back. Of course, it takes 4 years for the microwave signals to get back here and reconstruct the ones and zeros into images of the planet X, Proxima Centauri b. But 24 years later, theoretically, they said 20% speed of light. Theoretically, it would work. Why did they send 1,000? And why are they super tiny? Because they know at least half of them are going to be completely annihilated en route. And they're hoping just a couple of them might survive enough that the camera works and the transmitter works to get the data back. That's little tiny drones going 4 light years. See, flying saucers kind of do the extrapolation. I said it. R.I.P. alien space traveler. Rest in peace, because you're dead long before you get here. And then, just kind of thinking out loud, how is it that aliens manage to survive trillions of miles of interstellar travel and they crash when they get here? Really?
They don't have caffeine. They're too tired after that.
Yes.
After that long drive.
All right, on to the philosophical, theological arguments for we are probably alone here. Fermi's paradox, raise your hand if you ever heard the term, Fermi's paradox. Oh man, I knew this audience would be amazing. All right, for those who didn't raise your hand, then we'll go a little quickly. Fermi said, if intelligent life is common across the galaxy universe, where is everybody? I.e., we haven't had any confirmed alien visitation or an intelligent signal capture on this planet after, I'd argue, 60 years of super dedicated effort. Where are they? And he came up with this just at a casual lunch with some physicists in 1950, apparently. There's tons of proposed solutions. Here's an image with a few of them that some are super funny and fun, and some aren't. I like the destroyer be destroyed, so there's this theory, there's some hyper predator civilization out there, and as soon as you reveal your presence by sending out radio communications, they come and wipe you out. So that's why I don't hear anything from everybody else, because they're either smart enough to be quiet or they've already been wiped out. We're the fishbowl. They're here. They're just watching us, seeing if we're going to nuke ourselves to death or not. They're just too far away. You can see some of the rest. And then there's actually life is extremely rare, I argue. You ever heard of Occam's razor? The solution with the least assumptions and complexity is probably right. We're alone is probably the right answer for if you use Occam's razor. The rest are a little convoluted. So here, from the theological perspective, and we're in the Christian Ministry group, we are the pinnacle of creation. So there's the kind of, you know, the word arrogant is thrown out a lot, especially by Tyson and other people who are on the internet and on TV shows. Like, it's arrogant to think we're alone. But from the Bible's perspective, we're it. Like, this was all for us. The humans are the pinnacle. We're created in the image of God, and the ultimate purpose for this universe and the crowning achievement of an infinitely powerful and loving creator. That's consistent with the we could be alone. So there's some verses that sort of just highlight the importance of man to God, as conveyed by the Bible, both in the Old and the New Testament. So there at the bottom is kind of where I think it gets a little tricky and interesting and could be the source of conversation either tonight or moving forward, which is in Hebrews 9, there's the verse that says, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many, and he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. So the concept of Jesus incarnate and dying and resurrecting, we just celebrated recently, on this planet. If there are other planets, well, there are other intelligent beings, how do you rectify that with, you know, could they really exist? And if they do they not sin? Or does Christ go and be incarnate elsewhere and also repeat the act? It's hard to kind of imagine that as likely. That said, alien algae or apples or alligators on other planets? Okay. Maybe. Could have created that stuff elsewhere. But intelligent soulish beings with the imago Dei and free will, I think it's a little trickier, perhaps. Okay, we got the same side again, huh? So then, how do we explain all these UFO and alien abductions? Here we're getting to the pinnacle. 3 slides left. One option. You're in. You believe. Intelligent alien life exists. At least some of those residual UFOs are physical spacecraft piloted by intelligent extraterrestrials. And at least some of the close encounters and abduction stories are true. So ETH stands for the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Plenty of people on board that. 2, the 1 to 5% that are the residual UFOs, they're all natural phenomena, hoaxes, or hallucinations. We just haven't figured it out yet. So they're just nothing. They're all explainable. Or number 3, the residual UFOs are real but non-physical phenomena. They're a manifestation and activity of interdimensional beings. It's called the IDH, the interdimensional hypothesis.
We're getting into real Marvel territory.
Uh-huh. Well, you'll see.
So the angel Gabriel.
So let me go to the internet
Shoot, actually.
and play this video for you that's gonna tee off this. I was gonna show that one too. Okay, so enjoy this video. You're gonna see what we're talking about for the next 3 slides.
This guy.
B. Elizondo is a former intelligence officer with the Department of Defense. He claims he was the director of AATIP, the Pentagon's UFO program from 2010 to 2017. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has defended this guy and said he actually was pretty prominent in the government working on these things. Here's what he had to say.
And I remember the conversation very well. This is a person I respected tremendously, very, very senior person. He told me, he said, Lou, I want you to stop doing this. I said, okay, sir, I certainly can, but may I ask why? And he says, well, we already know what it is. Now, at that moment, I honestly thought maybe it was our own technology. I was running up against some super uber secret sat, and they were telling me to stop. And I said, okay, sir, so it's ours? And he said, no, that's not what I'm saying. And he said, he asked me point blank, have you read your Bible lately? And I wasn't quite sure where he was going with that. I said, well, sir, I think I know what it says, but where are you going with this? And he said, well, then you would know that these things are demonic, and we should not be pursuing them. Yeah, and he wasn't kidding me, but that's exactly how he felt.
So this is a Pentagon, this is a Department of Defense official saying, stop looking at UFOs because they're demonic.
Correct.
Correct. Not all.
Okay. So I don't know what you're thinking right now. I don't know if you saw that coming. But that is the essence of this real but not physical option in how to interpret UFOs, alien abductions, and all this stuff. And as you'll see on the next slide, if it works. Yeah. There's the 3 options for review. That guy's name is Lou Elizondo. So that's from a YouTube short by, this is Hugh Ross. He's the author of 2 of the 3 books I've got here. He's the leader of the Reasons to Believe in His Hand, and that's his hypothesis. And he has many YouTube videos about him explaining why he's very convinced that's the case. And why I think it's probably, I'm convinced as well. I think of those 3 options, this is the most plausible from a scientific perspective and perhaps the most consistent from a Christian perspective. Here's why. So there's those 2 books I've got right here. They're kind of the main source docs I've used along with a lot of YouTube. But you gotta admit, so there's throughout scripture, many, tons of references to angels and demons in scripture. Yeah, we're in America in the 21st century, don't experience much. I don't know if anybody in this room has ever experienced it. Maybe. But if you're a Christian and you believe the Bible, you gotta accept the existence of interdimensional beings / angels, demons. It's just a tiny, tiny handful of the encounters that have occurred between humans and interdimensional beings throughout history as recorded in the Bible. Right off the bat, the serpent. Kind of think about for a second from this perspective, a talking snake or some other entity would be shocking. There's one in Numbers. God opened Balaam's eyes to see the angel. Big story there. In multiple occasions in the New Testament, demon possession is mentioned and freeing people of demon possession by Jesus and the disciples. In Luke, in the Christmas story, imagine for a minute with this lens on of a heavenly host appearing in the sky out of nowhere, a bunch of beings floating in the air. From the 21st century, how would somebody describe that? So then, wrapping up there, 1 Timothy 4:1. Called it. The Spirit clearly says that in later times some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. So, that's the Apostle Paul writing that. And here's why I think it's kind of the last big slide. I've got a bunch of little bullets here I'll hit you with. So many of these UFOs, they defy the laws of physics. The Navy video, if you watch it throughout and others and hear these people, these pilots particularly talk about these things, all the time, speeds 5,000 to 25,000 miles per hour in our atmosphere with no sonic booms and no heat friction trail. You know, if a space, like the space shuttle or a spacecraft that comes down, they bring the ISS pilots or astronauts back down, sonic booms, heat trails. You can see it and hear it. Never hear anything with these UFOs. And they'll instantly accelerate. They'll go from like 0 to 60,000 feet in 2 seconds or something like that. Very common in these UFO reports. So that's impossible for a physical craft to achieve that kind of movement. The messaging that when there are contactees or abductees, the messaging that aliens convey to them is interesting. Over the last 100 years, so about 100 years ago, the reports that, I guess people who investigate this stuff, the beings, if they've been conveying messaging to their abductees or contactees, they were saying, we're from the backside of the moon. And then fast forward a few decades, it becomes public knowledge that the moon is not habitable for any type of life, and the story changed. We're from Venus. A couple decades later, Venus is way too hot. We got the data. There's no way there could be aliens on Venus. We're from Mars. And now, where do they say they're from? Other planets, from other star systems, or other galaxies. So it's as if the aliens keep pace with the scientific development, discovery, and public knowledge of the scientific realm. Then there are several textbooks, or not textbooks, there's several books that have been developed through automatic writing or like people in trances, and this maybe the most famous one, I guess it's the Orantia or Orantia book. And it's some alien that talked to some guy who was kind of asleep, and it's like 2,000 pages long. And like the first 2/3 are knowledge that you humans need to know about the origin of the universe and how you can protect yourselves. But then the last third is about how Jesus is just like not God. And he's just one of a huge panoply of minor gods, and he happens to be the deity associated with this planet in this universe. That's odd that a third of this huge book is devoted to try to say Jesus is not who the Christians say he is. There's also a direct correlation between occult involvement and encounters or abductions. This research has been compiled with enough statistics to make this pretty clear. So, for example, per capita encounters are higher in places where there's just more people into the occult, like Ouija boards and psychic readings and astrology, stuff like that. So France, Ecuador, Brazil, Hawaii, even here, like Hawaii and Alaska, there's just more of that. If you know the numbers, there's way more people who
We have Alaska.
Hawaii or Alaska.
I don't see
Find the
Sedona.
Alaskan.
Right. Oh, you can go nuts with this one. Obviously, just examples, you know, they're.
Do you feel targeted?
Probably doesn't help
I
that
figured
we're
it was
staring
safe
you
to
down
put that
now.
in. No. And close encounters are usually bad, usually deleterious. It's occasionally when the aliens are described as benign or sharing some useful information with the person, but usually the least of the after effects is nightmares, like for years. Extreme psychological damage is the norm for people who have actually encountered or been abducted. And the interdimensional hypothesis is actually the preferred option for some of the most devoted and expert UFO researchers on the planet, most of which are not Christians. Like, I think I've got this marked. I'll just read a couple. So Jacques Vallée is a French guy who's, I guess, kind of the guru. Like, he's the main guy. And here's his conclusion from this book. It's kind of a funny title. Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men by Hugh Ross and the gang. Got reasons to believe it. It says, the UFO phenomenon represents evidence for other dimensions beyond space-time. The UFOs are physical manifestations that simply cannot be understood apart from their psychic and symbolic reality. What we see here is not an alien invasion, it's a spiritual system that acts on humans and uses humans. The guy's not a Christian. J. Allen Hynek, so he's the guy who came up with the close encounters terminology and was the physicist involved in Project Blue Book. It says, in the same way that a poltergeist can produce very real physical effects, the residual UFO problem essentially is solved. That explains why UFOs can make tight right-angle turns. That explains why they can be dematerialized, why sometimes they are picked up on radar and sometimes not, and why they are not detected by our infrared equipment. So that's Hynek. Paul Davies is a famous astronomer. No clear distinction can be drawn between UFO reports and descriptions of religious experiences of, say, the Fatima variety. And John Keel has a big quote I won't. Or it's all the same thing. They're all concluding. I think the IDH is right, and they don't believe in angels and demons. My conclusion, these are my words: flying saucers and little gray men. It's just a continuation of the deception strategy that's been in play for centuries, actually millennia. It's just that here we are in the 21st century, sprites, gnomes, leprechauns, chariots of fire that were described as being seen in the skies above Jerusalem by many, many people right before it got destroyed in 70 AD, as reported by the historian Josephus, not a Christian. There's tons of reports throughout history of things being seen, but in the 21st century with our technology development, if extraterrestrials are real, God probably isn't. So this is the ideal strategy for the enemy at this point in history. And it's not new. That's just angels and demons, if they're interdimensional beings, they can look like flying saucers, just like they can look like a leprechaun. And that's what they're choosing to do because it works. So 1 John 4:1 says, dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. back. So what do you think? There's your 3 choices. Aliens are real, it's all hoaxes, or it's interdimensional beings, which we call angels or demons. This one's testable though, as Dr. Ross says in a lot of his YouTube videos. When he'll encounter people who are experiencing UFOs or have been abducted or whatever, they often trace it down to occult involvement, either by them or a close family member or a close friend. And they say, if you stop it, guess what? No more UFO encounters. And it happens. Like, it really don't happen anymore.
I'm curious how many of these reports come from Scientologists.
Ooh. That's something I bet you could research and find out. But yeah, exactly. Just a couple of verses to end it up. In 2 Corinthians, so again, Apostle Paul making this call 2,000 years ago. God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. And again in Ephesians, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood or alien flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Yeah, there's some books. There's a lot of YouTube videos. Thanks for listening. Hope it was interesting. Gives you something to think about. And not, I didn't use all the time. I knew that'd be too many slides.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Of course, come on.
I'll start.
I knew you would, Luke.
With the current model, right, with the beginning you were pointing out, because I do continually hear, right, that there's blank number of habitable planets. You pointed out their version of habitable is mostly temperature, right, for liquid water. Is there anything else? What else is factored? Is it just, oh, okay, so it's purely just 0 to 100 Celsius?
Yeah, good. And it's a function of the worldview. Like, it's like, if there's water, there's life, because that's true here on this planet. Everywhere there's liquid water, there's something alive in it or near it, right? So I just think extrapolate, again, it's another extrapolation fallacy. It must be easy, must be everywhere. So that's all we need, just need liquid water, there's life.
So I'm curious, what makes the interdimensional beings theory, in your mind, what makes that so much more likely than the second theory of it's all hoaxes or drugs or whatever, and we just don't have, we don't have the resources to chase down every dumb report that the Air Force or Space Command or whoever gets?
Yeah, excellent. One is volume, and the other, I guess, is credibility. So there's thousands of these reports that evade any sort of natural explanation after great effort by those who are in the business of trying to explain the events. I guess that's it, is that like the video, I mean, those Navy videos, there's tons of them like that. And in the congressional hearing, the pilots that were on that panel, or witnesses, they said this happens constantly. We're afraid for aircraft safety. Even civilian pilots and airliners are like, we see little black cubes in pills, clear pill-shaped glass all the time. I've never seen it, of course, but there's so many claims. And then, of course, the other part is it's totally consistent with the Bible. As a Christian, I would expect there to be activity by the enemy in this age. Why would it have stopped? It's described ad nauseum through the Bible. He's not giving up. This is the perfect play at this point. You make people think there's life elsewhere. Their creation, I mean, Genesis 1 is pretty clear. This creation was a supernatural event. But man, if there's tons of others around, he probably didn't do it all. So he's probably not real. Cast doubt. The great deceiver. That's the devil, and his army's main weapon is deception.
Yeah, I only ask because when I hear about this stuff, my general inclination is to go, okay, if they can't explain it, then it's probably the Russians or the Chinese.
Actually, that's part of my background too. Like my first assignment, being a second flyer. That was one of my later assignments in the foreign material exploitation. My first assignment was out at Edwards Air Force Base on a classified project I can't talk about until 2016. And it was really awesome technology we were developing, but it's not like that crazy.
Nothing to that
And we're
level.
just as good at it. I know the Russians and Chinese skate compared to us in reality, so there's no way.
Okay.
They just can't do it. Yeah, it's fine.
So there's a famous quote, and I don't actually know where it's from, that any sufficiently advanced technology would be indistinguishable from the supernatural.
Yeah.
That's
Why
Carl
would
Sagan.
we infer the supernatural instead of just a sufficiently advanced technology?
The behaviors that are documented for these aircraft are impossible due to the laws of physics. That we have an atmosphere. You cannot go through this atmosphere with this density of molecules without generating a sonic boom or a heat friction trail. Can't happen. I guess that's my short answer. Is that satisfying, or what do you think? What's your comeback?
No, I agree, it's just,
Is there another explanation? Anybody? I mean, I'm not really an expert on here. I'm just kind of thinking through it and reading stuff. Go down. What do you think?
Well, from a mathematical probability standpoint, I would be suspicious if we could explain all of them. Given the volume of alien sighting reports that come through, I would expect some of them to be both credible and unexplainable, even given that they're all hoaxes. That's just how large numbers work.
So you might be on the option 2 train.
If we could explain every alien encounter, I would think they were real more than I do now.
Logical to me.
What do the abduction stories, what's the general theme of that?
Yeah, there's a pattern, of course. That Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men has a whole chapter on it. I'll try to remember it here, real time. So time disappears. So the abductee, typically they're either in their bed or they're driving along a road late at night by themselves. Sometimes it's a couple. The most famous one happened in 1961, and the couple were driving to New Hampshire and they'd been on a vacation and they got home 3 hours, like 3 hours disappeared. Only later under hypnosis did they start remembering what happened, and they were taken aboard an alien spacecraft. Medical examination is common, and then some sort of communication, typically. And it's either really threatening, like humans are about to screw it up, get rid of your nukes, is a common theme. Or everything you've heard from your religious leaders or textbooks is not quite complete, or it's wrong, and we beings from other planets really know the truth, and we'd like to share it with you. So, and then they wake up, or they don't really wake up. They don't even realize it happened. If they're in a car, they remember they just get home. Like they didn't even know the time went away. So that's almost always the pattern to the supposed abductions.
What about the book that you mentioned that was 2,000 pages long? Was that an abduction?
No, there's different reports, but the theme I kept coming up with is some guy would just like talk in his sleep, like routinely. And then people next to him decided to start writing it down. So he ended up saying, and they wrote down thousands of pages of material that ended up stacking up tons of papers, and nobody attributed the author.
Why does this sound familiar?
So, and it self-describes, this is messaging from celestial beings with no human author. That's where that came from. It's not the only one, it's just the most famous one. It's like the core text for several of the ufology cults that are alive and well today in the United States.
I guess, I kind of came up with a response.
Hey, yeah.
That kind of, if we say, yeah, there should be a trail of plasma or something if you go through atmosphere that fast.
Yeah.
That presumes that we have an adequate understanding of physics. Shouldn't we assume that anybody visiting us from a different planet that got here without ablating their spacecraft on empty space, shouldn't we presume that they should be able to travel through an atmosphere without leaving a trail?
You could, but I wouldn't. I would personally say I'm quite confident in our periodic table representing all the possible configurations of fundamental particles we have conclusively discovered in this universe. You cannot, I mean, the basic laws of motion and energy and work and all the stuff you've been plagued with in your time here at Mines. I know you have to take all those classes, right? They'd have to turn off. They'd have to turn those off. So you have to, like you said before, you have to jump to the, this is magic or this is supernatural. You can. Many do. Many people, they'd be like totally fine with me. They have this, and the proponents that make a lot of YouTube videos, that's totally their tactic. Like they've got an anti-gravity device that looks like a ring. It's just, you can buy it or you don't. I just happen to not buy it. I'm like, I'm a physicist. I'm super confident. If you're flying through this atmosphere, you can't help it. There's no way around it.
Again, just logically, I feel like Occam's razor comes into play with that too.
Good point. I like it. Yeah, that's good. I remember this guy. You ever heard of Stephen Greer? Dr. Stephen Greer. Give you some names if you want to look up crazy stuff at some point when you're really bored over break. Like his videos talk about he was a former NASA scientist and he saw the alien spacecraft. He saw the aliens that are alive that we keep at people's houses and stuff for a while before they die. And there's 70 different species. The little green ones aren't as common as the little gray ones. Like, it's unbelievable. You're like, he's keeping a straight face. Like he's describing this with, if you just absorbed his stuff, you'd be totally on board. Like, this guy's got a PhD. He's talking about 70 species of intelligent life from other planets. Must be true. Yeah.
Have you ever heard an like argument that there's other humans, like basically not like a multiverse, but like life just like us elsewhere? But like God maybe created like two Earths.
Yeah, sure. I've heard Christians even speculate that could be true. We would never have contact with some other. It's not said anything. The Bible's silent, right, on extraterrestrial life. There could be another planet out there that was fine-tuned to host intelligent soulish life. We'd never, if it's 2 billion light years away, we'd never know it, never would, never could. Why I'm skeptical about that is the salvation story. I can't rectify how Christ dying once for all, or because it does say many, so maybe there's a little sticky. Christ died once for many. Maybe there's a little loophole there for others, but I think the many means some will reject him, will reject that sacrifice and choose to reject God. That's my only hesitation. Well, I would vote if I had to bet money on it. I would bet, yeah, we're probably it. Great question.
I know C.S. Lewis wrote a trilogy playing around with that idea that I still haven't gotten around to reading.
Oh yeah, that's right, the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis.
It's great.
It's great if you got
I read
time this summer,
the first one.
looking for something to read.
Yes.
Is there an explanation why like interdimensional beings would show themselves as really fast triangles floating through the air?
I know, right?
Really different from that.
I think what these authors will describe who are proponents of that and write about will say, because this modern society in the 21st century is now used to craft, just aircraft and spacecraft, right? What these things do are just beyond the limits of what our scientific understanding of what's possible is. So it inspires awe and interest and fascination, and that's the window into belief, and then that could start eroding away, because the ultimate goal being, you're not alone, you're not special. The Bible says that you're it, like humans are it. And this whole universe was created to bring humans about and conquer evil and redeem billions. But if there's plenty of aliens out there flying around in spacecraft, that might contradict the Bible, what the Bible says. I don't believe the Bible. I think that's it. It's just the mechanism.
Yeah, they're trying to deceive people.
That's
Yeah.
been the playbook for 70.
And distract people, I think is like, I don't know, I feel like I've just seen it around school, like there's so many conversations in our classes just about like aliens. And it just happens and you talk about it, people have their own little theories, but it's just like ultimately a very large distraction. And people get invested in it and they think about these things and then you just kind of leave it and it leaves this like who knows, but you don't prod, like, you don't spend that time thinking about some of the other deep questions. So it is very much a distractor, I think, for people's worldviews.
I'm glad you brought that up, Luke, because that is the main theme of another awesome C.S. Lewis book called The Screw Tape Letters, where it's all about a demon getting his orders from on high, and the whole point is deceive him, distract, deceive, deceive, just chapter after chapter. But you're right, but there's an opportunity here though too, because this is such a popular topic, and now you've sat through an hour and a half of presentation and discussion on it. At least you have some fodder to have some interesting chats with either fellow believers or people, friends, roommates, dorm mates that are into it. Be like, guess what I heard from this crazy guy from Colorado Springs? They're demons. I'll get it started. Then if you just go on YouTube and type in "Are aliens demons?" Boom, you got thousands of. There's all kinds of like Christian YouTubers who concur. Like, that's probably it. That's the only one that's consistent with everything and all the data and the Bible. Yeah.
Going back to the like silicon-based life stuff, what's the basis for the assumption that maybe chemistry works the same way 4 billion light years away or something? Like, do we have any evidence that we can assume that it'd be the same?
Evidence that it would be the same.
Would it be different?
I guess the evidence is based on the extraordinary diversity of flora and fauna on this planet. Oh, millions of species of plants and animals and microbes and stuff. They all follow the same pattern, have the same requirements. And the most basic bacteria has to have X number of different types of molecules. They have to have a liquid water environment because of the unique properties of that H2O, physical properties, allowing the transfer, I need that biology class, right? About cell membranes and stuff, like even the most basic form, there's no chance anything like it could happen with anything else, any other molecule, compound, or liquid that you could even imagine from the periodic table or chemistry. I guess that's where this confidence, at least I have in people who are on this side of the argument, would say, yeah, you can speculate about methane, liquid methane and stuff, but when you then dive one layer deep, they're like, there's no way, there's 1/1000th of the molecules that you need for the simplest life form that could form in that environment. It's just implausible. It's kind of a lame answer, I think, but.
But we do know stars work the same.
What's that?
We do know about stars.
Right.
Stars are the same everywhere.
That's true. From observations, we can observe stars all across the universe. And that's one reason we have high confidence in this periodic table and these laws of physics being applicable throughout the history and the extent of the universe. You take a spectra of a star 12.5 billion years away and you see the same oxygen, carbon, neon absorption lines that you see in a lab right down the hallway.
If Big Bang is correct, then they all came from the same source.
That's right.
You're talking about, earlier you were talking about the pattern that's set up about alien encounters. That same idea was found in, I think one of the books was called Embraced by the Light. And it was people having these experiences of some sort of being that they would be this great big light. And a friend of mine read all these books and just categorized the same pattern that was reproduced by other authors as like, hey, I'm on that. I found that too. But just like they had to keep up with the latest thing.
Yes.
And so it was just like a pattern.
Yeah.
Some fad almost.
Yeah.
And then it just fizzled away.
That's fascinating. Yeah, you're watching up videos about what people have seen in mass UFO sightings, because they exist. It's always like a pill. It's always a tic-tac. So these same shape of objects that you see in those Navy videos from around the world, Australia, Zimbabwe are some famous ones. They're almost always like this white pill-shaped spacecraft. And sometimes they land and tic-tac. Yeah, tic-tac. which is what I do. If I was the devil, I'd be like, let's be consistent all over the place, because that makes it more plausible. It's a bunch of crazy different shaped things to be like,
For the people who say that there hasn't been time for life to evolve on Earth, it's just too complicated and 3.5 billion years isn't long enough. So it had to have come from somewhere else via a meteor or something. Why do they think that helps? Is that somewhere else there was more time?
it's one element, I think, yes. Well, I think be aware that the main motivation is an a priori, wholehearted commitment to naturalism. There is no there is no supernatural option. It's off the table. Thus, as implausible as a panspermia scenario may sound at face value, it has to be true. Then, you've already committed that this has to be true, then you start speculating. And indeed, if there's another planetary system that formed 10 billion years ago in this galaxy, it had way more time for the primordial soup to have pumped out those amino acids and started sending asteroids around the galaxy, and one landed here. Okay, yeah. Once you've dismissed the supernatural hypothesis, that sounds pretty good. You're honest about it. It's like, okay, I can see that happening. Yeah, Square.
What is your opinion on the Roswell event specifically? Is there a human or natural explanation?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't gone deep enough in it to really be super highly confident in the conclusion.
It was the Soviets, wasn't it?
That's what everyone's freaked out about. So there's the psychological aspect. The cover-up, which was a weather balloon, it was intentional by the government. That was the Cold War at its height. 2 years after World War II ended, we were freaked out. So anything indicating potential Soviet technology over New Mexico was like, whoa, we have got to stop this. But I think that, I mentioned it, the Operation Paperclip, where the United States really did they snuck a bunch of Nazi smart guys over. And they were developing aircraft that were...
A bunch of them ended up at NASA and were heavily involved in the Apollo project.
You got it.
Werner von Braun being the main one.
Nice, good history. Yeah, so in 47, the United States did not want the public to be aware that we had a bunch of Nazis in New Mexico developing technology for us. So that makes the most sense to me of some sort of aircraft that looked abnormal, atypical, were flying around. Wrong place, unlucky, ran into each other, something, I don't know. I don't know the details, but I think that one it was definitely military technology that got
My
it.
favorite theory is that it was an information operation trying to trick the Russians into thinking we had alien technology.
Oh.
I don't think that's likely at all. But
I love it. Yeah, I haven't heard that. That makes sense too. No, that's what David Grush really, he's absolutely convinced. The guy I know and met, I was like, wow, it's hard to come full circle. I'm like, how could that guy seem so normal?
In Star Trek: The Next Generation, they did have a panspermia program
Nice.
where the Klingons and all of the different
Of course,
races,
it's the Klingon.
Terraforming, right?
Yeah, that's right.
they all were placed by a previous type of human type character.
Wow. Old idea.
I don't know very much about them, but what about tardigrades? Are those things indestructible or something?
They're extraordinarily survivable, apparently. So brought up tardigrades. If you haven't heard that word, it's a tiny little
They
animal.
wouldn't fit with panspermia. They wouldn't be the one, right? Because we didn't observe them at the earliest forms of life, right?
Right. Yeah. So they're an example, and they're a fave of the panspermia crowd, right? Look at these things can survive in interplanetary space here in the solar system for months, if not years. Again, I think it's the long jump analogy. Any sort of living object surviving in space with that radiation environment and cosmic rays for probably millions of years, making the transit between any conceivable, even nearby solar system to here and landing and then replicating. It's just crazy.
what's a tardigrade?
The little tiny. Water bear, yeah. If you look it up on your phone, you'll see a little animal. They're like microscopic, but they look like bears.
Got the 6 legs.
like little caterpillars.
Yeah.
They have little legs, got a little nose, they're
Yeah.
really cute.
They're very cute. Just look at a microscope.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing creatures. And you can go to like, way to go, God. That is awesome. That you managed to have that here on this planet for us to enjoy. Yeah.
Wormholes.
Oh, it's 8:36.
Just the word.
What about wormholes?
Like, I assume that they're real. I don't know anything about most kinds of astrophysics, but like, if they are real,
But they
Like,
look like it. Don't tell me that.
what are they? And is like the piece of paper like folding in half, like pencil through it? Is that
I think
accurate?
that piece of paper punching a hole through it, like what's her name does in that Marvel movie, is.
I know exactly what you're talking about from the
Yeah.
last Marvel movie.
Thor's girlfriend.
Jane.
Yes. Here's my understanding. It's not my focus either. I studied the cosmic microwave background for 3 years and wrote a dissertation just to get a diploma. But on math, I guess in the crazy math that some of these nerds do around the world all the time, it's possible in numbers. But I think they're typically associated with crazy spots in the universe like black holes.
Like a naked singularity.
Yeah.
Which probably
Which then
not
if
possible.
just for a moment, imagine any being like you or even a tardigrade going near someplace like that. Spaghettification is inevitable as the first step. You heard that phrase. It's the gravitational force on your feet is so much greater than your head when you get near the event horizon of a black hole. You start stretching out like a piece of spaghetti. You won't know it for very long, of course.
That sounds painful.
And you'd have to get there first.
You have to get there. The nearest black hole that we've discovered, a stellar black hole, so the core of a star that went supernova is like 1,000 light years away. There's probably closer ones. Probably. Still, we're talking, it's take thousands of years just to get to Proxima Centauri B with our current propulsion technology. Then you can go like, well, advanced, speed of light's the speed of light. You can't break it. Yeah.
There are black holes that it is possible to cross the event horizon without being spaghettified.
Good point.
And a spinning black hole, if it were spinning fast enough, would create a visible naked singularity. It's possible that you could get the conditions right to pass into the naked singularity. No one knows what happens then.
Matthew McConaughey does.
Yeah.
It's not an interstellar style wormhole. It would have a lot of that.
This guy, like.
You know, maybe we should just do what nobody in movies ever does and listen to Jeff Goldblum and leave well enough alone.
Yes.
Jurassic Park,
Don't you guys have homework?
Independence Day. Just listen to Jeff Goldblum, guys.
Maybe I'll close this out.
Yes.
Leave it for
And then I
anybody
can
else
hang
who
out for a
wants
little
to.
bit if anybody wants to
Perfect.
talk about wormholes or.
I have no doubt. Physics questions are always, it's astrophysics and biology are the talks that we have where there's just a million questions you can answer before or after.
Yes.
So good luck. But thank you, Dr. Walker, for
Yeah.
the talk. Okay, a couple super quick announcements before we finish. One, t-shirts, they'll be here, I think, by next week.
Next week.
So next week, show up with a willing heart and a ready spirit for t-shirts. Two is next week, our topic is gonna be from Dr. Daryl Doyama. He'll be back. We're very excited. We love Daryl. And his topic is God a party pooper? And I won't be elaborating on that. You just have to come find out what he's gonna talk about. But it's gonna be really good. So definitely be here next week. Additionally, we're going to whiteboard next Monday. And so we'll be out, right, on probably the plaza. We're gonna have a whiteboard and we ask some people things. However, I have a special request for this whiteboard. It's next Monday. We'll probably be doing it from 9 to 4-ish. The Lord has provided in the realm of Carl and his church, and we will be having so many Girl Scout cookie boxes to give out to people. So we expect a lot of traffic, let's say that, we have hundreds of boxes to give out. And so we'll be having people come up and answer the question and have a discussion for a box of Girl Scout cookies, not a cookie, a box. per person. And we'll also have the little poll that we're gonna want people to fill out. But that means we can't just have like 2 of us, because there can't be a line of like 20 people wanting Girl Scout cookies and forcing them to have a conversation before they get one. So I would highly encourage, this is a great opportunity to come whiteboard. If you haven't done it before, or if you have, definitely try and stop by.
What day is it again?
And it's next Monday, so April 15th. The topic, thank you.
Is following God a burden?
There it is following God a burden? We're very excited, right? Yeah. If you want to hear more about it, or if you want some information prior of how conversations might go, just reach out to one of us leaders and we can talk about it. We'd love to. But it should be really good conversations. So definitely stop by next Monday. Yes, Lexi.
And if you come whiteboard on our behalf, you can even have a box of cookies.
I will ditch class to drive over here just to get a box of shortbread.
Yeah, so we're very excited. It'll probably be, we're not 100% sure, but it'll probably be our last whiteboarding of the semester. So definitely stop by if you can.
What time?
9 to 4-ish range. So whenever you're available, you're free to come out. There should be somebody there, and everybody's welcome to stop by. So please do get some Girl Scout cookies, hand them out, make people's days, have good conversations. Yeah, I think that's everything. The whiteboarding, Daryl, shirts, cool. I'm gonna pray us out, and then you're free to go or pester Dr. Paulsgrove for the next you good for 4 hours? Cool. All right. Dear Lord, thank you for this evening. Thank you for that talk. Thank you for the fun we can have together. Thank you for truth and evidence and how we can pursue it. Please bless every person as they go out of this room, as we continue with the busyness of school towards the semester ending. Once again, Lord, our prayer is that you would open conversations, that we wouldn't just hoard this as intellectual knowledge, or just let it go in one ear, enjoy it, and out the other, but that we would really actually spur on conversations with our friends, with our classmates, with our families, anybody around, so that we might open the door for the gospel, or just to have a very good and fruitful dialogue with those around us where each party can grow. So thank you for what you're doing through this club and each person here, and just again, Lord, bless them as they go out. And in your name we pray, amen? Amen. Awesome.
Yeah.
Concerning
Girl Scout.
Maybe they have the super.
Yeah. Just like a box. That's great.
The alien talk is always.
Yeah, you can have a box if you answer the question.